evening, it's 9 p.m. This is the India Development Debate. I'm Sandeep Gurumurthy joining you live from our news center in New Delhi. Modi means business. The Prime Minister will create history of sorts tomorrow, becoming the first Indian Premier to deliver the keynote address at the Davos Economic Summit, and he's dropped enough hints on what his Davos diary will look like. In exclusive chat with the Times Network, Modi said he will make a strong pitch about how India is emerging as the investment hotspot, coming on the back of a 30-point jump in the ease of doing business index and the ratings upgrade by Moody's. The Prime Minister will host a dinner meeting for global CEOs and will also address Indian industrialists on the sidelines of the summit. Modi's Davos address comes at a time when the country is at the crossroads as far as the economy is concerned. Limping back from the twin blows of the note ban and GST, industrial output is showing signs of recovery, backed by a spike in bank credit growth. The big concerns remain the steady decline in GST collections and weak private investment, even as rising inflation and the spike in crude oil prices are threatening to spoil the macro party. So will the PM be able to hard sell India's bold structural reforms to global CEOs? Will he manage to convince Indian corporate honchos on loosening their purse strings? Modi at Davos, that's our topic of discussion on the India Development Debate tonight. But first up, an excerpt of the exclusive interview that the Prime Minister gave Times Network just before embarking on that flight to Davos.
कोई नरेंद्र मोदी या प्रधानमंत्री इसके रूप में कोई विशेष कारण के रूप में मैं इन चीज़ को देखता नहीं हूँ। ये इसलिए संभव हुआ है कि भारत ने प्रगति की है। भारत ने अपनी आर्थिक ताकत दुनिया के सामने मजबूती से पेश की है, तो स्वाभाविक है कि दुनिया भारत को जानना चाहता है, डायरेक्टली जानना चाहता है, समझना चाहता है। और मैं इसे एक अवसर मानता हूं कि हमारे 125 करोड़ देशवासियों ने जब एक प्रॉपर इकोसिस्टम मिला तो खिलने लग गए। नीतियां साफ सुथरी मिली, वो इनिशिएटिव लेने लगे, रिस्क लेने लगे, आगे बढ़ने लगे। 3.5 साल के भीतर भीतर भारत की जो ये पूरा टर्न अराउंड है, फ्रेजाइल 5 से लेकर के ब्राइट स्पॉट तक का, तो ये भारत के 125 करोड़ देशवासियों के पुरुषार्थ का परिणाम है। और मेरा काम है दुनिया में जाकर के उनके गीत गाना, मेरा काम है मेरे 125 करोड़ देशवासियों की पराक्रम की गाथा दुनिया को बताना, मेरा काम है विश्व के सामने जाकर के हम प्रगति की कई नई ऊंचाइयों पर पहुंच रहे हैं ये दुनिया को बताना। और मैं इस अवसर का भरपूर फायदा उठाऊंगा कि विश्व भारत का सही रूप देखें, भारत के सामर्थ्य को समझे और भारत के अवसरों को वो भी अपने हित के लिए इस्तेमाल करें, क्योंकि भारत एक आज बहुत बड़ी अपॉर्चुनिटी बना हुआ है। विश्व में काफी बदलाव आया है। डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज हो, पॉलिसी ड्रिवन गवर्नेंस हो, ट्रांसपेरेंसी हो, इंटीग्रिटी हो, 125 करोड़ देश में बढ़ता हुआ मिडिल क्लास का बल्क हो, 800 मिलियन 35 से कम आयु के लोग हो, और इन सब के साथ जैसा मैंने कहा डेमोक्रेसी हो, तो विश्व का उसके प्रति आकर्षित होना बहुत स्वाभाविक है। ये हमारी जिम्मेवारी है कि हम ये मौका जाने न दें।
Prime Minister, in an exclusive interview to Times Network before heading to Davos, let's get you a big corporate view before we open the debate tonight on the India Development Debate. Prime Minister Modi's presence at Davos Summit will send a strong signal to global investors, says Tata Sons Chairman N. Chandrasekaran. In exclusive chat with ET now on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum Summit, Chandra says India will continue to remain the biggest investment hotspot for a long time. Also says the green shoots of recovery are already visible in India. Here is a slice of an exclusive conversation that he had with ET Now's Executive Editor News, Supriya Srinath.
I think it's going to be a very important week for India. The Prime Minister's 3-year journey has been phenomenal. He has taken several structural measures And I think we in India are aware of it, and by and large in the world outside, it's well known, but still, I don't know how much it is fully appreciated, whether it is the GST, whether it's the bankruptcy law, and many number of other initiatives. I think his coming here and using the Davos platform will send out a very strong message in terms of the growth that India is about to see, and the significant opportunity that exists for investors, domestic investors or international investors. So I think it's going to be a great week.
It's a great week for India, I mean, no doubt about that. But, at a time when the idea of globalization is under threat, we are seeing economies like India turn, there's a lot of antipathy to globalization. How serious a claim do you think India can stake as far as, stake claim to being a more important influence in the global economic order?
I think on the contrary, I would say that India can have the biggest claim. It's going to be the largest growth market for at least a couple of decades, I feel. We are going to be the third largest economy in another 10-15 years. Then if you look at the per capita income, there is a significant improvement that has had to be had. All of these things present a significant opportunity for all companies around the globe. So this is a market that everyone will want to come in, and the policy reforms that have been put in place and the ease of business initiative that's been driven, where we have made a significant progress, and the transparency and the accountability that is being brought in, all of these things are signals that will go down extremely well with international investors, and I think it's an opportunity everyone will want to participate.
A lot of people that you speak to at Davos say India has a 130 billion opportunity and not just one market. But while the Prime Minister is trying to woo global investment here, you are someone who heads a conglomerate that has very, very diversified interests. Given those interests and given how deeply entrenched you are in the India growth story, as an Indian corporate, what do you want to hear the Prime Minister say? He's coming armed with the GST that has been rolled out. It's trouble set aside. He's coming armed with a higher World Bank ranking. He's coming armed with a Moody's upgrade. But there are a few reds on his report card. Joblessness for one is one of them. Inclusiveness, for instance, the WEF ranking today doesn't bode very well for India. As an Indian corporate who's so entrenched with the India growth story, what would you hear the Prime Minister address?
See, I think from my point of view, I think a number of things are being done. We are already seeing green shoots in India. One thing that we would expect is for the Prime Minister to continue on the path of reforms, on the path of initiatives that he is driving in order to solve the core problems in the country. I think that reinforcement will be good. As a conglomerate, we are making significant commitments to India. Already we announced a 25,000 crore investment in steel, and we are looking at further investments in the steel business. We are looking at stressed assets. We are doubling down on our investments in automobile, both in commercial vehicles and passenger cars. We are looking at electric vehicles. Our investments will also go in the infrastructure sector. So I think we feel India is the place to be, and we will be doubling down across all our segments. One word about jobs. I think it's a tough one. India has the biggest opportunity in the sense that we have huge talent that's coming in, but at the same time we also have huge shortage of skills. So we have to make sure that we address these problems so that they meet.
That skill mismatch apart, there is obviously a lot of euphoria here in Davos for India. There's obviously a lot of euphoria that Indian markets seem to be sharing. Do you believe all that euphoria justifies the fundamentals, or do you believe there are fault lines that need to be addressed? And which ones would those be?
I think the potential absolutely is there. And I already feel that the growth rates will pick up this year, and 2018, 19, 20 will continue to keep picking up. If at all, what we need to address is execution. Continue to pay attention to execution so that whatever reforms and whatever policies are announced, they are implemented. We should get better and better at execution.
And this is on Air India privatization. There were these reports that you were interested in that. Now that there is 49% FDI that has been allowed in Air India, will we see a joint Tata SIA bid? Is that an asset that interests you at all?
I think we should wait.
Are you giving me a headline here?
I'm not going to give an answer on television on what we are going to do.
That's a big corporate view. N. Chandrasekharan in a rare interview exclusive to ET now speaking at Davos ahead of the Prime Minister's historic visit and address to the plenary session at the Davos World Economic Forum's summit tomorrow. Okay, let's open the debate tonight. We've got an interesting panel joining us on the show this evening. Swaminathan Iyer joins us live from Washington. We've got R. Jagannathan as well, editorial director of Swaraj magazine, and the two politicians on the show, Narendra Taneja representing the BJP and Sanjay Jha, spokesperson of the Congress. Thank you all so much for joining us on the India development debate. Swami, I'm going to kick this off with you. The message from India seems to be very clear. If you look at the hashtag that the government is promoting on Twitter as well, it's simple. India means business. I'm asking you a simple question. Does it?
India does not mean particularly any more business than it was doing last year or year before last. This is a country that moves forward incrementally. It is, however, right now a country that suffered a serious setback in 2017, the double whammy of demonetization and the GST glitches, which slowed us down. And instead of being faster than China as expected, we became slower than China probably in 2017. But precisely because of that bounce, that low base, we will have a bounce back in 2018. Very probably we will once again overtake China. We will once again become faster. But is India dramatically going to change? Is there going to be any serious opening up? Are we going to be dropping our tariffs? Are we going to be integrating much faster? No, I don't think so. In fact, there are a series of protectionist moves that you see. How do we bring about Make in India by perhaps having higher import tariffs on electronics and so on. So frankly, I mean, there are some positive things going on the financial side, very positive things on resolving things on having an exit policy for bad promoters. Various things are improving, the reforms are going on, but there is no dramatic change. India is an incremental changer and is continuing its incremental path.
Jaggi, before I take it to the politicians, Jaggi, do you think Swami is being too cautious there, and not taking note of the dramatic change that has changed? So Swami is saying India means business this year just as much as it did last year. But between last year to this year, what has changed is GST has been implemented. Our rankings on the ease of doing business index have jumped by 30 points, and we've got an upgrade from Moody's, which we haven't got for 14 years. So there have been some change. Does the Prime Minister have a better story this year than he did last year? Or would you agree with Swami and strike that note of caution?
No, I think I would be a little more optimistic, though I think all that note of caution was important. But our problem is that we missed the global uplift that began about a year ago, and because of our own two policies, which is of course the two disruptions that came in 2016 and thing. But what we have done is we have fundamentally laid a lot of changes which will start paying off in future. I mean, when you have GST, obviously you will have short-term hiccups. But I think over the next 2 years, as it settles down, it is going to be a revenue gusher at some point once you have streamlined all the and ironed out the kinks. Second thing, once you have the IBC, once you start, for the first time in Indian history, we have sent the message that business is not a free lunch. If you guys fail, if you guys do not pay up, you are going to wind up. I mean, this is the first time some message is going. This is a very good message to give over the long term. And so when the Prime Minister is going to say, look, the field is not going to be tilted against foreign capital or whatever it is, you are going to let slothful players walk off into the sunset. All these are important messages which will not yet deliver in terms of what you call immediate growth. But I think if you look at it 2 years down the line, these things are going to pay off like in spades. I think that's where I think what is ahead, I think looks much more brighter than what is right now in front of us. And the Prime Minister has a good message to give, saying that look, India is changing. We have started doing many things differently. We might even privatize Air India and a few more things. The only thing he needs to do is he needs to start privatizing the banks. If he had fixed the bank problem earlier, actually he would have been doing much better now.
but better late than never. Now is probably the time to start doing it. But yes, he has a positive message looking forward. He doesn't have a good message looking in the last 2-3 years where we missed the uplift in the world economy.
Okay, fair enough. And we do want to talk about the exact messaging that the Prime Minister should be focusing on tomorrow. It's an address. All eyes of the world, like it or not, are going to be on this address by the Prime Minister. So what should be specific messaging is something we will touch upon. But let me take it to the politicians on the panel. Narendra Taneja, to you first. At the end, you heard our two experts on the panel. But simple question, do fundamentals of the economy justify this euphoric narrative? At the end of the day, we're an economy that's growing at best at 6.5% this year. And as Swami pointed out, it's incrementalism that we've seen over the last 3 years. Do fundamentals of the economy justify this narrative of sort of, rising India that's been built?
Well, my answer is absolutely. I mean, India is rising. Is a bright star. These bright star is not a certificate issued by the government of India. They are experts, they are economists, or companies and players and investors. They are the one who are talking about it. And Davos, as you know, is about basically, how foreign investors are looking at India. And I myself interact with investors all the time because they come with their queries and questions and apprehensions and anxiety and so on and so forth. So by and large, they seem to be very convinced about the structural changes that we have introduced, including demonetization and the kind of, ecosystem that we have managed to build, our focus on infrastructure, our, fight against corruption, and at the same time, initiatives being taken by a number of other governments. They may not be necessarily BJP-run states, but they have taken some initiative. For instance, TMC government in Calcutta, they recently organized this big conference to attract investment to Bengal. Not our party, but part of India. We're happy about it. Because the same goes for a number of the states may not necessarily be ruled by BJP. It's not about BJP. Davos is not about, when we talk about this message, it's not only about BJP-ruled states, about the whole country, including Punjab, Karnataka, and other states. So overall message, when you look at it, for instance, the way we are looking at ourselves in terms of Bharatiya Janata Party and NDA, and also our own industrialists, plus, of course, the international business community. Message we are getting is very loud and clear, that they want to come and invest. They think when they look at, for instance, the global picture as a whole, they find India to be bright spot. If you don't want to come and invest in India, or if for some reasons you don't want, you come and invest in India, where else you go? You see, the question is that.
But India says, Narendra Taneja. Okay, Narendra Taneja. Point taken. Narendra Taneja.
But we are the best destination for foreign investors.
Okay, point taken. Let me take it to Sanjay Jha. Sanjay Jha, you heard the comments there from Narendra Taneja, but I have a sort of direct question to you. India has jumped 30 points in the ease of doing business rankings. Moody's has upgraded India's sovereign rating after 14 long years. We've seen the economy grow at 6.5% despite two disruptive structural reform. I know reform is a controversial word for demonetization, but both after GST and demonetization, despite those two twin blows, the economy is growing at 6.5% and poised to grow at well over 7% over the next few years. We've seen the government open up the floodgates for foreign investment, indicating that it's an open economy. Just last week, we saw liberalization in retail, something that your party tried to do when it was in power. As far as foreign investments are concerned, foreign direct investment has jumped 40% in the last 3 years versus the 3 years preceding that. So, is it all Jumla, as the Congress party would make it out to be, or would you concede that when the Prime Minister says India means business, there is some truth to it?
Sandeep, what is the hard economic reality? That roughly 80% of Mr. Modi's tenure is virtually over. And the next budget of Mr. Jaitley is going to be the last. Now, it is clearly a case of a missed opportunity. We have missed the bus. And, the global recovery of the economy is now virtually plateauing off. US, Europe, even Japan showed fairly decent growth. But I think India in its exports completely failed, to take advantage of that market opening up. But more fundamentally, I think we really destroyed the domestic base. And look at the advantage we had, Sandeep. We had the advantage of a huge tailwind, a massive tailwind on oil prices, where it came down roughly by 80% from $110 to $115 a barrel to as low as $25 a barrel, and stayed there for over 3 years. And we lost that opportunity. Point number two, Look at the state of domestic private capital formation in India. You know, FDI, we keep talking about FDI numbers, but the truth is if you want to see the Indian economy take off, jobs to be created, you need very significant private capital investment, and that is at a 13-year historic low. Now, you have a real double whammy here. You have a situation where domestic capital investment is not happening and you have inflation beginning to rise. Now, the situation is frankly fairly grim. When you look at the fact that you had a successive fall in GDP and a 6.5% is a very low GDP actual growth because of only one reason. India needs at least over 8% GDP to create jobs, to create the kind of level at which we can lift people above the poverty line. So the truth is GST and demonetization was a break. You know, it was a self-imposed break. I think the GST is a monumental disaster in terms of governance because it's a great indirect tax reform. We created the architecture, but its execution wasn't shambles. Demonetization, I don't want to even talk about
exactly.
it. I think it's a mammoth disaster for India.
Okay, Sanjay, we've debated GST and demonetization a fair bit on this channel. You've been a part of many of those discussions. But Swami, can you deny the fact, you've heard the comments from both the political representatives on the panel, but can you deny the fact that Prime Minister Modi has managed to change the narrative around India? Even though, as you yourself pointed out, incremental steps have at best been taken on the economic front, the narrative around India is far better than what it was a few years ago, which is why India is getting what many is arguing a seat in the global, you know, in a high table of sorts, its rightful place in a world economic order, so to say. Would you give some credit to the government for having managed to change the narrative, for having managed to change the conversation around India?
The narrative about India has unquestionably been transformed from the UPA days. The last couple of years of the UPA days were seen as a disaster. I spent half a year in Washington, D.C., and the way the whole business community had turned against India at that time and saying this country is just, just going down the tube. So, I mean, those last 2 years of the UPA government were really bad in terms of India's image of what was happening abroad. From that, yes, there has been a large and significant turnaround, especially if you add it up. But at the same time, and the attitude of US business is that, okay, this country is set for business again. There is no policy paralysis. There is no implementation paralysis. It's a very difficult country to do business. It's getting a little better. And the market is so large that we cannot ignore it. So I think these are the attitudes. The narrative has changed. But has the narrative changed to the kind of euphoria there was in China? When, China was going at 10%, 12%, 14%. We are nowhere near that. We are still a distant poor cousin of China as far as the global economy is concerned, as far as the global image is concerned. We are improving. We are doing a little better, no doubt about it. And yet, you look at our credit rating. I mean, yes, there was an upgrade by Moody's from very, very low to just still pretty low. We have a long way to go. This is a poor country with very serious economic and governance problems. But yes, the sheer size of the economy is such that nobody in the world can ignore it. There are a number of green shoots coming up just now. After a bad year, there's going to be a better year. The world climate is improving. I'm glad to say that the kind of strong anti-globalization and protectionism things that one saw at the time of Trump's election, some of those global forces seem to be diminishing. So I think we can look forward with some optimism. I will simply say that there is no great, enormous transformation. I return to the theme that's incremental, but there's nothing wrong with incrementalism. Incrementalism isn't bad. I'm merely saying that it's not a revolutionary change. It's improving, and I do believe we will get back to the fastest economy status in 2018, overtaking China. But even then, if you're at 7.5, please remember this country was doing 9.5% in the mid-noughties. So, we are far away even from where we ourselves were.
Sure.
The foreign investors know it, we know it. But, India is a good bet, but we still have a long way to go.
Sure, fair enough. Jaggi, I don't know if you got a chance to read this Wall Street Journal piece today, which sort of said that India should use this opportunity, the Prime Minister should use the stage to push a muscular vision for India. And the fact is that for far too long, we've been very apologetic of claiming our seat in a high table of sorts, so to say, when it comes to economic matters. Yes, Swami spoke about the comparison. Yes, China is still 5 times the size of the Indian economy. And yet, India is a market that, frankly, no corporation in the world can afford to ignore today. Is it time that India sheds these inhibitions, stops being apologetic about claiming its rightful place? And it's not about a government, frankly. It's about a country, claiming its rightful place in the global economic high table.
Yeah, I think in terms of key economic decision making, we are already there. Our problem is that what we aspire for and the size we need in order to make our presence felt is actually there is a gap. We are at $2 or $2.5 trillion economy. Once you cross $5 trillion, then you will have enough heft to invite yourself to any table you want to. The point is you haven't reached there. It's only when you cross that threshold and in terms of per capita income you cross $3,000, $4,000 per head, which is another 7 or 8 years away, that is when you actually can be where you want to be. Today you are trying. I think the fact that there is political stability in India is giving India an opportunity to actually be at the high table, but it's the economic performance that needs to catch up. Once that catches up, which is a matter of 6 to 7 years away, then I think you will actually get your whole thing. But by and large, I think we are pulling our weight in the climate change things. We are actually making an impact everywhere. We are in 3 of the the nuclear and missile technology, all those regimes except NSG. So we are there slowly. I think UN Security Council and all is probably 10 years away, because for that economic cloud counts. Then you reconfigure the geopolitical order according to economic might. But we are still some time away from there. We can't aspire for more than our economic heft.
Okay, and we will talk about that in terms, again, I'm going to touch upon the specific message that we should expect from the Prime Minister. But before that, an important question for Narendra Taneja of the BJP. Now, Narendra Taneja, the same World Economic Forum whose founder, Klaus Schwab, was referred to as the Prime Minister as a friend of India, today has come out with an inclusive development index, which has ranked India at the 62nd place among emerging economies. That's lower than China, which is ranked at 26, and Pakistan, which is ranked at 47. Our ranking last year was 40. So World Economic Forum, that's going to celebrate the India story, believes that India is not doing very well when it comes to inclusive development. How are you going to respond to that, Narendra Taneja?
Well, you see, absolutely no doubt about it. There are a number of internal challenges in terms of the distribution of wealth and distribution of fruits of the growth and so on and so forth. No doubt about it. But that's being addressed. That's what we are basically trying to do in terms of NDA government. With various schemes and various projects we have launched, and and Aadhaar is very much at the very core of the whole thing, in order so that we can move actually on that particular track even faster. That's the whole idea. But you see, when it comes to Davos, when it comes to the we have to do all this simultaneously. On the one hand, we deal with the kind of internal imbalance that you refer to in terms of money in the pocket of the ordinary people, but at the same time we have to continue to expand the economy. We have to attract more investment, and we have to make sure that we continue to grow even at a faster rate, and only then we'll be able to get to, for instance, where you just the question you asked to the previous panelist in terms of place on the high table. I think we are already there if you see it very careful. Of course, when it comes to Bretton Woods institution, that's a different story. But that's why China is trying to create new one, and India is also some places joining hands with China to create new international financial institutions and new international bodies and so on and so forth. But the question, this is all part of the evolution. My own assessment is that 5 to 6 years from now, you will see our place very firmly on the international economic high table, and at the same time, number of issues when it comes to the internal distribution of benefits of growth and all that, the area which actually is at the very top of our internal agenda and 2019 political agenda, those also on those areas also, indexes also, India will be performing much better. But let's not forget one thing, we are a federal structure. There is a limit to what central government can do, and states run by different political parties, including our, they also have to put that on the top of their agenda.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. But 18, fair enough.
But it's a very top.
Okay. Okay,
especially
but
when it comes
18
to
of those
rural
states
economy. Once
fair
we are able to address the rural economy issues, I think that will be taken care
Yeah,
of.
but Narendra, 18 of those states today are governed by the BJP and not by any other party. But Sanjay, you had a quick rebuttal. I'm going to let you come in, and then I'm going to take it back to my to the experts on the panel. Sanjay, a quick rebuttal from you.
You know, Sandeep, I think one of the problems that we need to address, you know, we are a very urban business channel, but you know, end of day, we need to recognize the question that you raised. If I had a very pertinent point, where is India ranked on the inclusiveness of development as in terms of our economic performance? And clearly, it's fairly wretched. I mean, you know, end of day, the truth is India is a large country. We have complex problems, and you know, when you still have 22% living below the poverty line, you're talking of around 300 million people. So therefore, you know, if our rankings go low, I think it's a message somewhere that your economic model is completely failing. It's actually falling apart, because the job of any society, any economy, any government is to ensure that somewhere you reduce inequality. I don't know where Swaminathan Iyer's optimism comes from, but if you look at the hard data, it's disconcerting. 1% of Indians own almost 73% of our wealth. Basically, you're saying that income inequality, Sandeep, has got further aggravated during the 4 years of Mr. Modi in government. Now, that is a failure, frankly speaking, of public policy. And you know, this is the same government that mocked Manrega, that made fun of subsidies, that called our economic policies as povertarian policies, and ultimately is recognizing that India cannot adopt the, you know, the so-called American model, where you just rely on growth to create revenues, and then you will fund the revenue for welfare and, you know, various subsidies. It hasn't worked.
Okay,
you know,
okay.
Fairly purely capitalist model. It's a stock markets that are going to keep the profits, and the government retains most of it and is not getting enough tax collections. Okay. Even GST is not giving you enough tax collections. So I think fundamentally India has a huge challenge, and I think Mr. Modi's government must recognize that on the demographic dividend story, the absence of jobs is telling you that over 4 years we have failed as an economy.
Okay, you made your point, Narendra. I'm not going to let you come in now. I'll come to you in just a bit. Let me take it back to my panelists, because again, I don't want to make this a UPA, NDA thing. You know, I think people can decide which economic policies are doing good to the country. This is not the platform for that debate. But Swami, an important point, which is what should be the Prime Minister's message? You know, Uday Kotak gave an interesting interview to PTI today, where he aptly says India needs to position itself not as a salesman, but as a statesman. And it's time that India makes a transition. For years, we've had finance ministers and industry ministers go to Davos and, you know, talk about the same thing: India's demographic dividend, India's, you know, free market policies, India's open sort of policy architecture. It's the same narrative, effectively, whether it's UP or NDA. Is it time India makes a transition from positioning itself as a salesman to a statesman, as Uday Kotak puts it? What should be Modi's message to the world tomorrow?
I don't think we are anywhere near achieving that particular post of being a statesman. We are still very much in the sense of we are a poor country, what can others do for us? Are we posing the question constantly on what are we going to do for others? You would have to do that if you claim to be a statesman. We are nowhere near that particular position right now. So while, you know, in the long run that may be a legitimate aim, that's not the kind of thing we should be getting into right now. I remember I was in one discussion on the question of economic diplomacy, and the question was, which are the major economic goals India should be aiming for in trade negotiations? And a couple of experts, they said the real problem is that within India we don't seem to know what is the kind of overall policy we would like, and therefore it's very difficult to fight for that particular thing. They said in the 1990s, did anybody see that IT was going to be the thing of the future? When the auto industry was coming up and we were desperately trying to say indigenize in the 1990s, did we see that India had the potential to become a global auto hub? If we ourselves do not have a clear idea of what are our strengths, where do we want to end up at, then we don't even have the ability to sketch out this large vision and saying, I am here, I want to be there in terms of total economic philosophy. Instead, we say, I would like a little better here, a little better here, give me a little more investment there. But do we have a new philosophy to sell to the world, saying this is where we want to be? We are nowhere near that. I don't see people even addressing that particular idea of India having this kind of world vision. There's a complete mix-up on, do you want to be more protectionist, do you want to be more free, in which areas do you want to move, which are the new visions you have for the world as a whole, as distinct from India. So I'm afraid there, we are not even starting, let alone getting to a clear vision of where we want to be.
Okay, fair enough. Jaggi, comment on that. And again, you know, the context of this talk by the Prime Minister. A few days later, Donald Trump is going to address the same gathering of business leaders globally. We had Xi Jinping address this platform last year. And sort of, you see this in the context of what America is positioning itself. Donald Trump is walking the talk on America first. So when he says America first, he's walking the talk. He's drastically cut corporate taxes. He's trying to bring back jobs and profits back to America. So he's walking the talk there. Xi Jinping obviously trying to position China as a more open economy, attracting more global investment, having sort of, you know, got a lot of investment from domestic investors, now trying to open its doors for more foreign investment. What should be India's positioning? You know, should it take a more sort of Trump-like position, focusing on domestic investment? Should it take a more China-like position, open the floodgates for more foreign investment? Or should it try and carve a path of its own? What should be India's position at Davos?
See, India is not a unitarian state like China, where everything can be decided top-down. So you just need a small think tank and Xi Jinping can have a vision for the next 30 years for China. So it's not like that. Nor is it a completely open economy like the US, where the entrepreneurial energies are so strong that, I mean, they get you out of a mess sooner or later. In India, I think that what I would have liked the Prime Minister to do is to say that, look, we are a sum of the parts nation, where, let's say, you could have taken 4 strong states with strong chief ministers and say, look, these are my growth states. Like, say, you take, let's say, Maharashtra, Gujarat, or for that matter, which are Haryana or Karnataka, take the 4 chief ministers and say, these are the guys you need to talk to. They are going to drive huge thing. India is actually an economic union of aggressive states. We are going to devolve power in future. All these states, these are the guys you need to talk to. I will be just helping create the broader image, but these are the guys who are going to drive growth in India. These are the 4 key chief ministers you need to do, and next time I hope all 20 of them will come here. And if you had sent that message, India's growth story will always be driven much lower down and not from Delhi. I think we have made a mistake for 70 years trying to drive everything from Delhi, and most of the money has probably gone down the drain. So I think Mr. Modi is changing some of that, but he is too strong a personality to be able to bring all these guys together. I think you need to let the state speak as the driving angels of growth, and that is the message. India, how India is quite different from a China or the US, you know. That's what we need to do.
Before I take it to the politicians, Swami, I want your reaction to the point that Jaggi's made, because, you know, at a time when the idea of globalization probably is under threat, you know, given the sort of policy position that Donald Trump has taken, and that you see this emergence of nationalist leaders, you know, who are focusing on more protectionist economic policy. That seems to be the norm really globally. What is the role that you think India can play? How can India sort of stand out and make itself more attractive to global investors? And should that be the core of Prime Minister Modi's message to global business leaders tomorrow?
I would say India is still far too small to be trying to play a global role on this. Secondly, India is most certainly not seen as any kind of champion of free trade. You spent all your time at WTO desperately trying to prevent any kind of freeing of that trade on agriculture, and saying, no, this is a country of subsistence farmers, and so we have to protect ourselves. So fine, you can say I am a country of subsistence farmers, but then you cannot be a global leader. Make up your mind what you are. Yeah, fine. So subsistence farmers, you know, that is the main interest. On top of which you have this ridiculous things like we are the protectors of cows, the greatest thing that has come in 1917. Is this going to give you a position of world leadership? So I said, you know, on the big picture, we are just nowhere near that. We are still a country on the electronic side. The whole idea is that for Make in India, actually we can't compete with anybody. So let us put larger and larger import duties so that we can sort of go ahead. On the solar equipment, there is a huge pressure. So please put a large dumping duty on the Chinese so that we can build up our own solar industry. If this is your own attitudes, if this is what you're putting out, Over and above this, you're putting up price control after price control on pharmaceuticals, on strength. You can defend it on various ways. But the question is, what is your overall vision for the world? And is that what you're trying to sell? Do you want to tell everybody else, oh, you please also protect your solar industries and you also protect your electronics industries and you protect your cows? So I said, we are nowhere near anything like a global vision or lessons for others. We are still tied up with all kinds of small problems of our own. This is still a small, poor country trying to come to terms with its own problems. It is not a country that's going to set the global agenda.
India is not going to set the global agenda, at least not yet. That's the call from Swaminathan Iyer. Quick view from you, Narendra Thaneja, before I take it to Sanjay Jha. Quick comments to the points made by both Swami and Jaggi on the debate so far.
I don't agree. I mean, we are a developing, emerging economy, no doubt about it, but that we don't have an agenda until 2022 or beyond 2022, or we are not really participating in a number of global, structural changes. Look at the role India is playing today, G20. If G20 is what G20 is today, I think our contribution has been among at the very top. And similarly, number of areas we might have doclams, etc., with China, but we also collaborate and cooperate with China in terms of bringing about a new international economic order. Not 100%, but we move in that direction. So I think when it comes to our own interest, we use BRICS as a platform, G20 as a platform. Wherever necessary, we cooperate with China, we cooperate with Russia, we bring in South Africa, we bring in Brazil, and so I think at multiple platforms we are working. The ambition is very clear. Ambition is that we want to be at the very top of the global play by over the next 20, 30 years. That's these things take time, but when you look at the journey that India is on and the kind of achievements we have been able to make, irrespective whether it was Dr. Manmohan Singh or is now is Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the fact is that India on that scale has done extremely well. You just have to talk privately with the Chinese or with the Brazilians or with the South Africans, with the Indonesian, and they'll tell you how successful we have been as a country, as I said, or in terms of positioning ourselves as a global power. Even the United States didn't become the United States overnight, and China may have a big agenda, but at the same time we all know internally many areas and places China is still struggling, is still a very poor country. So as far as we are concerned, I think vision is very clear. And many countries understand it, and that is one of the reasons India makes a very attractive destination for foreign investors. And there are many countries and companies, they want to come and invest in India for two different reasons. First thing, political stability, clean system, corruption-free, political system, and at the same time, they think by joining hands with India, by investing in India, they will be help building an international order which will be more stable and will also address to their concerns of the government or the companies that they might have in terms of the rise of China.
Okay, fair enough. Point taken.
Playing together, and we need to understand that how do we take advantage of it, and I think India is taking a good advantage of it.
Okay, fair enough. Sanjay, a quick point on that. The question I asked Swami a short while ago, what you cannot dispute is the fact that the Prime Minister's success in controlling the narrative around India, at least globally, and that partly explains why we've seen record flows of foreign investment, both FDI and FII flows. The incredible rally that we've seen on our equity markets, largely driven by FII flows, and there's been a lot of foreign direct investment in the Indian market as well. I get your point on Indian industrialists not investing in the economy just yet, but there are a host of other reasons, including the NPA mess, which was an inheritance of the UPA government. Would you at least concede the fact that if the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and this government has done a very good job of convincing foreign investors to put their money where their mouth is?
Sandeep, my experience as a former banker is that, when it comes to global capital, never get very emotional or sentimental about it. It goes to any market. It goes to any investment destination where they see a return on investment, short term, medium term, depending upon their horizon of whatever investments they have. So let's not believe that India is going to be flavor of the month all the time. We have been a flavor of the month, we have lost it, and this is going to be a continuous cycle that you have to battle. But I think there's a larger point that we should not miss here, and which is that end of day, if you read the latest article in The Economist, it was a very comprehensively researched piece. It was very disconcerting in terms of the finding. which was that India's middle class, which is basically the bulwark of our economic growth story, has gone missing over the last 4 years. Not just in terms of purchasing power, but in terms of jobs, in terms of the overall contribution to the economy that they were making before. And that, I think, is a significant fault line that has emerged. Point number two, you look at the fact that a large section of India, and that's the population we are talking about, when we talk of demographic dividend, it's not going to be only in Karnataka, Maharashtra and Haryana and the more populous states. It's in the states that we call Bimaru or more backward. And there the story is primarily in agriculture. And you look at the state of Indian agriculture in the last 4 years, I'm sure Mr. Teneja won't dispute that figure, that the average growth of Indian agriculture has been just 1.9%. Now, you know that agriculture links to the industrial economy as well. So, end of day, the rural economy being under continuous distress for 4 years,
Sanjay, I don't think anyone is disputing
the
that.
Structural foundations of the Indian economy.
Sure,
and my last, and my last point, and my very, very short last point.
Sure.
You see, end of day, India at this point had to be on a very high growth trajectory, and you find that the new investment proposals are at almost a 6-year low. So clearly the buoyancy that you're seeing in the stock markets, by the way, are not visible in the bond yields. Look at the bond yields, they are rising, clearly telling you that there is a very confused message out there. Stock markets have crossed 35%, bond yields are rising. The economy, by the way, seems to be fairly static, if not actually going in a regression form.
Okay,
so I think there are large concerns, and I would not be too carried away at this point by any hype and hoopla.
Okay, I don't think anyone should be carried away, but 2 quick points in response to what you said. One, acknowledgement of the crisis in the agriculture sector. I was happy to see the Prime Minister in interview Times now acknowledge the fact that agriculture is an issue that needs to be fixed both by the centre and the state governments. He candidly acknowledged that in the interview to Times Now sister channel. And to the point that you made on capital investment, it's, one would argue, Sanjay, that it's probably because there has been a complete reset of the promoter banker sort of equation in this country, which has led to why Indian industries are probably not investing. That's a debate in itself, but I take your point on the fact that one must not get carried away. Absolutely take that on board. Jaggi, a point that KPMG's global chairman in an interview with Supriya just a short while ago made at Davos ahead of the Prime Minister's speech, and Supriya asked him a very pointed question: what should India now do to get in more investment? And he made a point that you've made for years now, and on more than one occasion in this very program. And he said global investors now want action on tricky reforms, emphatically stating that labor reforms are needed if India wants to attract more foreign direct investment. And I'm sure a lot of sort of global business leaders and commentators would agree with you on that. Do you see any movement on that front? Do you see any political, sort of capital being invested in labor reforms by the Prime Minister?
In fact, factor market reforms have been missing. After 1991, we freed up the capital markets, but every other factor of production has not seen much reform. And the very tiny incremental changes that are happening in terms of labor reforms, the changes in the Apprentice Act, or for that matter, a slight easing in terms of reporting requirements through, through the online and all that. But those are not substantial changes. There is a move now to create fixed term contracts for employment, which will be some kind of movement. But unless you do a lot of it, and I think no party is going to allow the other party to do serious labor reforms, and the same applies to the other factor market, which is land. I mean, as long as you're not going to have a land market that's vibrant and it is over dependent on a very restrictive kind of a land acquisition bill, you're not going to get people and invest, because the two key factors of production are completely constrained by regulation. So I think we have to, I don't see any political party make any kind of thing, though at the state level we are seeing interesting experiments like land pooling and all of that, but those are actually ways of trying to get around the problem of the fact that you don't have reforms. I mean, land pooling and all is fine, but if you can't buy and sell land easily for industrial, agricultural, housing or other purposes, how can you call it land reform? They are not land reforms, they are just palliatives. So I think we need to get these two factors reformed substantially, and it's a 5-year job, it's not a 1-year job, and I don't see that happening. Unfortunately, that is the reality.
You don't see that happening, at least not now, and that's the reality that we need to live with. Swami, I'm going to let you have the final word, which is on projecting India as a soft power. You know, we spoke about the sort of economic sort of heft that India has or does not have, but you know, concerted effort is being made at the Davos Summit this year to project India as a soft power. You know, you've had Indian cooks being flown down to Davos. India is hosting a reception. Indian cuisine is being talked about. You have Shah Rukh Khan coming and speaking at the Davos Summit this year. Yoga is occupying a lot of attention at the Davos Summit as well. You know, a lot of global business leaders, you know, talking about yoga, practicing yoga at the Swiss, you know, resort. You know, not the most comfortable environment to be doing yoga, but an effort is being made. Does it count for much, would you say? And you know, look, we keep comparing ourselves with China. It's going to take years for us to beat China because as an economy, it's 5 times our size. But as a soft power, surely India can have far more impact than China can.
Well, soft power in the first place is soft. It is gratifying to some that the main dish, most popular dish in England is supposed to be chicken tikka masala. Without doubt, an entire industry has grown up in the United States on making yoga pants. Or there's a Bikram yoga, people trying to patent a different kind of yoga, different from Patanjali's traditional yoga. In various ways, yes, there is an Indian soft power. If you see the film industry, I think you just found that Amir Khan's film Superstar is got 200 crores apparently or something in China in turnover, cracking a very, very difficult market that even Hollywood finds it difficult to crack. In all these areas, yes, we have been expanding gradually. But that is not the only soft power. If when stories go around on inter-caste clashes of various kinds that you're seeing, that is part of soft power. And your image is definitely not good. The Goraksha business, the lynchings, this is part of the soft power business. On that, I am afraid we have gone retrograde. Our image is going down. If this is a country where people are beaten up, where people are lynched because they are carrying some cattle from somewhere to somewhere, the idea that, you know, no cow can be slaughtered under any circumstances, even when you see the cows roaming around on the streets. I mean, this is part of the soft power business. So I would say on the whole, if you see the kinds of stories coming out about India and the kind of bewildered questions some foreigners will ask on Indian customs and what's happening, I do not think all is well on soft power at all.
Swami says all may not be well in soft power, and he's saying it's time we transition from being a soft power to a major economic power. Completely timed out, Swami, Jaggi, Sanjay Jha and Narendra Taneja. Thank you so much for joining us in this fascinating debate on India's pitch. The Prime Minister's address is much awaited. Hopefully he's going to make it very clear that India means business and makes a pitch for India's legitimate seat in the global high table. But much needs to be done for India to really position itself as an engine of global growth. Hopefully a beginning will be made tomorrow. Keep it with ET now as we get you live coverage of the Prime Minister's speech tomorrow afternoon. Of course, up next is Davos Direct. Supriya, my colleague, reports live from Davos with a whole host of global speakers and Indian industrialists giving their views on what to expect from Prime Minister Narendra Modi as he makes his debut in Davos tomorrow.